Hello once again, brothers and sisters. This is the other Paul, and I perhaps believe my first interview with my new hairdo. And in fact, a very exciting, very awesome interview that myself and Zach here have been wanting to have for a while, but has been, for multiple reasons, had to be consistently delayed. But now we're finally here for this excellent discussion on Christianity and Stoicism. So, Zach, how are you going this fine Australian Saturday afternoon now?
I'm doing pretty good. Was getting all, like I was saying before the interview, was getting all my notes kind of all brought back together and getting it all figured out. But yeah, on that, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good.
Excellent, excellent to hear. And as I just said, I might be looking off to the side here because that's where my notes are for people who don't know, and they're a little bit disorganized at the moment because I didn't save them locally. But in short, this discussion is going to be especially about Zach, but also a little bit of my own readings in the ancient Stoic tradition and how it interfaces quite significantly, quite heavily with the Christian faith itself. And I'll probably even make some very I don't know if controversial is really the right word, but words that will at least raise some eyebrows about this, about the significant relationship between Christianity and Stoicism. But with that regard, Zach, please introduce yourself for those who don't know you.
Well, hi, my name is Zach. I used to go by Pastor Zach on YouTube until I switched to Anglicanism. Now I go by the Anglican Catechumen. I've been doing ministry for probably about 5 years or so. And in regards to Stoicism, I will never claim that I'm an expert of any sort of it, but I had been reading Stoic writings for possibly about 10 years now and have called them my first teachers before I took Christianity fairly seriously. And now I am, so I like to read Stoics. I like to read Puritans. I like to read Anglicans. I like to read lots of stuff. And yeah, and I like to make YouTube videos as well. So.
And that is awesome to hear. Thank you very much for that, Zach. Now, to jump right into it, I would be shouting out Actually, I will briefly just shout out my local supporters. Unfortunately, I don't have the name list up here because as new supporters come in and sometimes old ones drop off, I have to change the lists, and so I don't have an accurate list at the moment, so I can't really show one up right now. But a huge thank you to my legendary local supporters. Please do consider if you want some awesome extra content, as well as to help me turn what I do here with my streams and my videos and blog posts into basically a full-time career. If you want me to help me go along that route, please consider going to my locals page in the description below and becoming a supporter, and check out the different range tiers that I've established that give you different benefits. And actually one of those, excuse me, sorry, just got a little on the way here because I need it because it's a bit hot out there. But anyway, one of those is that once my Minecraft server, which I have just hired, and construction will be beginning on the spawn point sometime soon. I actually have to organize that. But once that's ready, the server will initially be opened exclusively for fellow supporters, among a few other helpers with my channel. So that'll be another benefit that you'll be able to get once you become a supporter, and at some near point in the future. But other than that, thank you to my current supporters, you absolute legends. And now we will jump right into it. We'll not waste any more time. So first, the most obvious question, Zach, what is Stoic philosophy in sum? And per our notes, that's basically the same as question 3. So ignore the third question in our notes. But what is Stoic philosophy in sum? What are its core teachings?
Yeah, so Stoicism was a influential philosophy in ancient Greece. It started with Zeno the Electic. Some people get him often confused with a different Zeno. Or no, sorry. It was founded by Zeno of Citium, not Zeno the Electic. Those two. See, I just did that. I got them all switched together. Originally, with the name Stoicism, it comes from the word stoa, meaning the painted porch, which was a place where all the Stoics would come together and talk to people on the streets and whatnot about Stoicism. And like I said, it was started with Zeno. There was other guys as well. One book, if you want to have a good biography of each of the Stoics, Ryan Holiday, somebody who will bring up later, he has a book called The Lives of the Stoics. And so it gives like a nice little history book there. But yeah, it started with Zeno, and it eventually progressed. Then there was different guys who came in, kind of gave their own like flavor of it. Eventually, there was some Neoplatonism kind of mixed in there. A lot of skeptics eventually kind of caved their way. And with lots of these writings from the early and mid Stoic times, we actually don't have. One of them, Chrysippus, was a very famous guy. He was the guy after Zeno. He wrote something crazy like 700 books worth of stuff, but again, none of them survived. The late Stoics are the ones that we do have writings for, and they do have and are the most known of them all. We'll talk about them here in a second, but I'll just throw them up. We have Marcus Aurelius with his Meditations, which was his journal. I have lots of books from Seneca here, but one that people might know is The Letters to the Stoics by Seneca. And my favorite of the three, Epictetus, with his Discourses or his Enchiridion, that is also part of that as well. And so these were like the top three guys that carried Stoicism all the way. It started about 300 BC. It carried itself all the way to about 529 AD. That's where we get like Christianity kind of moving into Rome at that time. And again, Neoplatonism kind of retook over. And so it got lost into the threadhold until about, I don't have an exact date, but eventually of recent time, it picked up a lot of steam with, again, guys like Ryan Holiday and some other people who like the ideas of Stoicism. But one thing that's different from classic Stoicism with the stuff that we read from Epictetus, Seneca, Aurelius, and the other guys, is that a lot of the time Stoicism we see today is kind of this joke term between actual Stoics called broicism, where it's like you take all like the stereotypes of Stoicism, of this I'm emotionless robot just thugging it out kind of deal, and or it turns into this how to pick up women or something that's just like a really goofy, like, this is Stoicism. It's like, this is not, like, if Epictetus came back from the past and saw this like broicism stuff, like it would be a complete disaster. But yeah, so there are different parallels from there as well. And like I said, it just carried such a strong impact that it's even mentioned within the Bible and other areas like that. So that's how popular it was in that case. You were asking about the teachings as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. Actually, just before you just before you get into like the precise teachings, whatever, I think you mentioned that you toyed with Stoicism a bit before you came to Christianity.
Yeah, I mean, I was already a Christian at the time,
Okay.
but I came through it more of an evangelical route, and it was one of those, even with Christian teachers who are like, some of them are my friends today, and they're great teachers on the Bible and whatnot. It was just, and this is kind of where a lot of people, especially young guys, pick up Stoicism. You kind of go through your teenage angst phase where you're either your great teachers are either like Nietzsche, maybe Marcus Aurelius, or Richard Dawkins or something, and then you go through the, it's not a phase, mom.
and you're posting that image of the lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of a sheep.
Exactly. When you see me run into battle, run with me. If you see me run away, kill me. Anyway. But I instead of, because everybody either usually grabs Aurelius first because of the Meditations. I didn't know about him, but I picked up the Enchiridion because I read the beginning lines from it, where because I was very emotional growing up, and so I had problems with my temper and other emotions like that, and to hear a guy like Epictetus, who was a cripple, who was a slave, who just had like the roughest points in life, during a course of his class, where like how the Enchiridion was supposedly written down, was somebody transcribing his lectures, to say there are some things that are just in your control. There are some things that are just not in your control. The things that are in your control, worry about. The things that aren't in your control, don't worry about it. You're just going to drive yourself crazy. And it's like, that's that. Like, I never thought about that. And then like I dove into the Enchiridion, and then eventually with that, it's like, you hear guys like Aurelius, and for a while Aurelius was my favorite, but it's like out of all the Epictetus is my favorite. But with Aurelius, with his Meditations, they were pretty good. And Seneca I wasn't a fan of at first, but as of late, I went back into reading Stoics and getting kind of re-familiar with them, and especially his book on the shortness of life, where hearing lines like, time isn't short, we just waste our time. and the time that we take for advantage is so short because we wasted all this time that it just seems like life is short. So quit wasting your time, quit doing stuff like that. It's like, oh, that, young guys, especially like through modern societies where you're told pretty much that you're worthless, and like the whole list of you're racist, you're this, like all this negative stuff, to have some dead guy from the ancient past going, no, you're not a bad person. You're just wasting your time listening to these people speak crap to you, and you need to quit doing that. And other things like that. So that's what drove me to like the Stoics a lot. And eventually I moved on from the Stoics. I started taking my faith seriously. And like I said, they're put on hold for a little bit, but eventually, like I said, they're my first teachers. And once in a while, it's like, well, I got to go back and read the Insured and whatnot. And it might cause a whole bunch of alarms for people, but it's like it even kind of influenced my Christianity for a little bit. Because like I said, I grew up in a kind of a loosey-goosey non-denom thing where it's like nobody taught it, but it was kind of this idea where it's like at any point, if you do something bad or wrong, your entire faith is now corrupt and gone, and all these like very loose, like your faith is so shaky and whatnot. But it's like reading the Stoics and eventually reading other theologians from across the board being like, no, things are predestined to happen. These things are like, some things are just out of your control and they're in God's control. Like in Job, for instance, or something like that. And I'm not saying Job's a Stoic by any means, but it's just like hearing like those very similar things that you've probably picked up on reading, where it's like, oh, okay, well, this makes sense compared to like the Epicureans or the skeptics, or it's like even some Platonist stuff, or even things like that. It's very easy for an uneducated person to pick up one of these books and read and just connect to it so well.
That's excellent. That really is excellent to hear. I never got into, like, I've been long more into explicit Christian teaching than ever I'd known Stoicism until only recently. But I'm personally encountering a lot of that same stuff. And so in all those readings from then till now, what would you say are those core essential teachings of Stoicism itself?
Yeah, so the core essential teachings are broken down into these 4 virtues. And you can find these on like little coins and whatnot, you've probably seen. But the 4 virtues are wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. Like, these were the things that the Stoics were told, this is what the purpose of life is for, to be virtuous. One quote from Epictetus on wisdom, where he said, the chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control, which have to do with the choices I actually control. When then do I look for good and evil, not to uncontrollable externals, but within myself to the choices that are my own? On courage, in his discourses, he put, don't you know life is like a military campaign? One must serve, one on watch, another in reconnaissance, another on the front line. So it is for us, each person's life is a kind of battle, and a long and varied one too. You must keep watch like a soldier and do everything commanded. You have been stationed in a key post, not some lowly place, not for a short time, but for life. And temperance, like the idea of like tranquility. Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations said, if you seek tranquility, do less. Or more accurately, do what's essential. What the logos of a social being requires, and in the requisite way, which brings a double satisfaction to do less, better. Because most of what we say and do is not essential. And if you can eliminate it, you'll have more time, you'll have more tranquility. And ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? And then finally, in justice, in his Meditations, you put, and a commitment to justice in your own acts, which means thought and action resulting in the common good, what you were born to do. So these were kind of like the 4 virtues that Zeno kind of taught. Like I said, they were passed down and created, and these became like the 4 central like virtues that you would hold on to as a Stoic.
Did these 4 virtues, were they, obviously they were taught by the Stoics themselves, but was that specific categorization of these are the 4 virtues, was that a thing in the Stoic authors that they came up with, or is it kind of like the 5 solae, where it's like a later
it developed later,
okay.
and especially the early-ish mid time of the Stoics, a lot of it was we have this philosophy, we have the idea of what we're teaching, but it's like it gets kind of crafted and redefined and other things all the way throughout to the point of like the end of the Stoic period.
Got it. That makes sense. And I think the funny thing, Josh, lovely to see you. It's been a hot minute, my man. But this comment is more relevant than you think, because with my own, as I've been getting into reading with Stoicism, I'll just say what I hinted at a bit earlier. With my own reading into Stoic philosophy and seeing how shockingly close it is to Christian teaching in numerous different ways, I basically came to the conclusion myself. I wonder what you think of this, Zach, that purely as an intellectual exercise, obviously Christianity, the Christian faith, is obviously the highest thing, but purely in terms of intellectual categorization, I would basically now categorize Christianity as a species of Stoic philosophy. What do you think?
I would disagree, just because a lot of their foundations were of pagan origin. They were very much materialistic, and especially their view of God. It's a little kind of all over the map, but for the most part, Cicero, who is not a Stoic, but he wrote very stoically, and that's somebody, actually Augustine picked up on a lot of his writings. In his book here, how to think about God, or is like On the Gods is the actual title of it.
Is it On the Nature of the Gods?
Yes, On the Nature of the Gods. He comes to the conclusion that like he gets so close to Christianity. Like when I read it at the very end, I was like, oh, come on, you're like that close. But pretty much he comes to the conclusion, this is kind of the majority of the Stoic thoughts, where the universe itself is God, and it predetermines, so it's very deterministic of everything, and we have free will, but we're also determined in things. And it was kind of the idea of everything's already determined for you. You kind of just have to just accept it, and then eventually the universe will go away and it'll kind of reset itself, and it kind of like starts all over. So that was kind of like the main principle of that. So I would not say at all that it's like Christianity, and like there is a lot of connections, and that's what you were saying, that's what I saw growing up, and that's what I loved about it. But it's like there are enough things that just made it not Christian at all. And even like I said, like in scripture, I'm blanking on at the moment, I can look it up really quick, but it even talks against like Stoic teachings as well. So that's one thing I always tell people. It's like, I love Stoics. So like, there's plenty to read, plenty I can recommend and hand you, but it's like, but now, however, this is not the end all be all. Actually read the Bible. That's the truth, not this. I mean, there's a lot of truth in this, but it's not the truth. So,
well, that's actually kind of that moment you said, when you said, oh, they get so close. He gets so close to Christianity, but then just miss the mark like that. That's basically why I do say that in an intellectual sense, personally, Christianity is a species of Stoic thought. Because on the one hand, obviously, yes, they had some major, being of Greek and Roman folk religion, they obviously had some very, very, very erroneous points on certain things, and yet they get a lot of things, including fundamental things, so right that's why I'm personally fine with, in terms of intellectual categorization, saying that there is there is something of a very close fundamental relationship between Stoic thought and Christianity. Although, of course, that said, you being a Stoic per se, you're not going to be saved. No, because Stoicism does not, and for the most part, it couldn't, because a lot of the time it preceded Christ. But it doesn't teach that you need faith in Christ to actually be forgiven of your sins. It teaches a lot of great things, which Scripture itself also teaches, about how to live virtuously, how to be content with your lot in life, and all those things, which are fantastic for personal living. In the end, though, you still got the stain and guilt of sin, which that's not going to get rid of. So obviously, complete in that sense.
And it even kind of doesn't really have a concept of sin, and in fact, it tells you to like kind of be one with nature. And I mean, we're both Anglican, so we can both like hear that line, go, "Ooh, no, you don't want to do anything close to nature, because nature is fallen and depraved in that sense."
Oh well, I mean, I think there is a bit of a distinction there in kinds of nature when we're talking about, like, you think of nature in terms of the thing itself versus versus like second nature, which is basically what sin would be. Like man in our nature, properly speaking, is good, but
Yeah.
sin, the nature of sin came, and it's like a layer over the top that corrupted it, basically.
Yeah.
So I personally, basically the Stoic saying, as Seneca himself says, "Secundum naturam vivere," to live according to nature. That's basically a Christian teaching, properly understood. Anyway, with that said, who in your reading, who are the most significant authors of the Stoic philosophy? You've mentioned them, but if you can go into a bit more detail with them.
Yeah. So the main three, kind of the three pillars of Stoicism, are Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Seneca, or Lucius Annius, I believe that's how you say it. Everybody calls him Seneca, but these were the three guys, Marcus Aurelius, and it's kind of cool because, and again, this is where anybody could pick up the Stoics. It's like, are you in a impoverished state where life is giving you the worst of the worst, and you don't know if there's any good future? Oh, read Epictetus. He was literally a slave beaten by his master to be crippled for life, and like went through the worst of life, and yet he could latch onto Stoicism. Oh, are you a staunch politician, businessman, or some other thing trying to achieve life and make the most of it? Here's Seneca. Read his letters, read his On the Shortness of Life, do whatever. It's like, oh, are you in a position of power? Are you considered obviously this would be bad for a Christian, but like, are you considered a god among your people? Oh, wonderful. Here's Marcus Aurelius while he was in the trenches of war as an emperor. So it's like anybody from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, wherever in the societal scale, could be a Stoic or could latch onto some sort of Stoic teaching. And like I said, like you even get guys like Epictetus who were these lowly to lowly dudes who got elevated to being so wide known in Greece that like he was considered a household name. Or like, again, sometimes he gets thrown in reverse, like Aurelius. Like he had all the luxuries of the world, yet where he wrote his journal, it spanned from the time when he was in a tent with his soldiers in battle to even sometimes in the gladiator arenas while all these things were happening. So it's like you could have these swirling ways of life and always latch onto it. More modern or other writers and more modern guys, like one of them, Ryan Holiday is one of them. I believe his name is Missimo. He wrote a book, How to Be a Stoic. He has a very different name, so it's hard to say.
So these guys, they're actually like self-conscious, I am Stoic, or are they just historians?
Yeah. Okay. They're actually like they teach Stoicism. Like Ryan Holiday, it's down there somewhere in my thing. He wrote a book on like the daily Stoic, or the obstacle is the way to like teach you how to be a Stoic in the modern day. And Missimo, I think that's his name. I'm just gonna call it that. But like he kind of does it from a more academic way in that area. And like other guys, like I said, Zeno was another guy, but again, we don't have any of his writings. And one who's like a kind of a honorable mention because he didn't say he was a Stoic, but he loved a lot of Stoic writings and whatnot, was Cicero, the Roman statesman who went against Julius Caesar. He wrote like on stuff on how to be friends, like on the nature of gods, and he would always pull from these guys. And so he's not, again, he's a Stoic friend, but not like an actual Stoic kind of deal.
Okay, great, fair enough. I don't know if I asked you this at the start, but you got to eventually when you can, you should definitely send like a list of those works, and I can like put it up, I don't know, on the local or in a comment or something, because that'd be very, very helpful for a bunch of people. And by the way, thank you who said that, Dr. Decapod, thank you for telling me that the link in the description to Zach's channel is dead, because it seems to be from his old name. So I found your channel, your proper link. So those who want to follow Pastor Zach, I was going to recommend this at the end, but just to get it over with now, the link in the description is dead. It's an old one. Go to this link, and this is Zach's channel. So thank you for that catch. And anyway, we can get on with that. Something I want to, I guess, kind of revisit. There is another work. I mean, it basically is just like a quote book, kind of like the Daily Stoic, but specifically for Epictetus. I don't know if you've heard of the Stoic Path by Hastings Crossley.
Yeah, I've seen that before.
This one I got, and I like it, and I hope this demonstrates, especially to any like non-Christian Stoics who are watching, I hope this demonstrates my, shall we say, my thoroughness. I'm not just like LARPing on like, oh, the Stoics are cool and based and Christian, but because I got this, and being the guy that I am with researching these things, and to kind of build on what was mentioned a bit earlier with parts where the Stoics do differ from Christianity. I got this quote. It's a fantastic little quote book, just little quotes from Epictetus from his discourses, and Caridian. And obviously, I wanted to check, okay, where are these quotes exactly from? I want to make sure they're accurate, they're accurately translated, and all that. Unfortunately, sure enough, I find that for the most part, it's fine, but in some parts, the translation is not only incorrect, but it's incorrect as to be making it say something fundamentally different, especially to a Christian audience. The key thing being where at some points, it doesn't happen all the time, but at some points, Crosley here translates, and I checked the Greek because, again, I want to make sure of this. At some points, Hastings translates the plural, theoi, gods, plural, as God, uppercase G, singular. And that obviously changes the context entirely, because I read some of those quotes and I was like, wow, this just sounds exactly like a Christian. And in many quotes it is, like, even to the point where, maybe you know of this, but even to the point where Epictetus just uses the same potter clay analogy as like Paul does. It's absolutely incredible. And Jeremiah. But then there's other points where he's not actually saying God, singular. He's saying the gods, plural, but Crossy just translates it as God, singular. Big problem. Have you ever encountered that, Zach?
Yeah, sometimes it gets confused because oftentimes, because Zeus was kind of like the big daddy of the gods, like sometimes they would just say like, oh, God. And everybody would kind of just assume you're Zeus. But yeah, that would be, and this kind of goes into like the Broicism stuff, where it's like a lot of people will try to just immediately latch everything Stoic onto Christianity because it kind of sounds the same. And I saw a guy on a video talk about reading the letters to the Stoics, and he said it was close to Christianity, so it's all Christianity. And they pretty much believe the God we believe. It's like, no, they didn't. They barely. Like, if they did believe in a God, like Aurelius was agnostic, but it's like if they did believe in a God, it was most likely either pantheistic or like, again, the pantheon of all the gods, or it was the universe God, or it's like, it's like Epictetus wasn't a Christian. I hate to break it to you. So sorry, but I mean, he died before Christ, so who knows what happened before, but it's just one of those like, no, he's not talking about the Judaic God, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately the case. But I'm glad we got into that, because in the end, it is obviously necessary to bring up where Stoics differ from Christianity if we're gonna be honest and make sure people don't just fall down into thinking, oh, the Stoics were just pure proto-Christians, because that's an obvious necessary qualifier for discussion of where they do complement the Christian faith quite a bit, in my humble opinion. But just before we get onto that, people, by the way, post your questions below. Super chats and local supporters get priority, so post them below for myself or Zach, but especially for Zach, because he is the guest here. He is the not expert, but compared to me on the Stoics, certainly an expert, definitely more than me. So put in those questions and we will get to them at the end. But with that said, with those great differences, where would you say are the most significant areas where Stoic philosophy agrees with or complements the Christian faith? And if even in particular, which authors maybe do you think, relatively speaking, come the closest?
Probably from a bird's eye view, where it complements a lot of things. And this is something that I was attached to growing up, reading a book like Ecclesiastes, like from a closeness. Again, obviously they're like just for sake of time, I'm not going to mention all the differences, but it's like, you could read Solomon in his old age, just looking at everything. And like, as some of these Stoics would have wrote, like Aurelius, for instance, in his journals, you could almost parallel these, like this king and this emperor, and they had all the women they wanted, they had all the wealth they wanted, they had all these things. It's like, this is meaningless. There's something more to this. And again, they came to different opinions, but it's like, especially for us in a age of hedonism. It's starting to kind of change, I think, a little bit, but just this idea of, oh, you want all the sex in the world? Do it. Oh, you want all this in the world? Have it. And just have all these like luxuries and like I said, this hedonism thing, but just to look at all that and go, no, there's something different here. Let's look at what makes a person honorable and virtuous and things like that. And like I said, there was differences to that. But again, picking up Aurelius or picking up Epictetus, who again, it was a big household name, but he didn't go for the money. He could have, and it would have been a different story. But he chose to remain the crippled beggar teacher who would do these lectures, or Seneca, who was a little bit more loosey-goosey with his funds. He's very controversial within Stoics. But even when he did indulge in the luxuries of life, he even said, well, this isn't the final thing. There's more to life than this money and this fame and the stuff. It's like, I'm going to be a virtuous, honorable person. And everybody likes a virtuous, everybody likes a virtuous, honorable person. But the trouble is that many people don't choose to be virtuous or honorable. Again, possibly because of the society we're around in, where we're told to do the polar opposite. And virtuous, honorable people are often weak or looked down upon in that way. And that's what a lot of these similarities are saying. It's like you look at like the ways of the world and looking back to or looking towards something that's beyond the realm of like the material and strive for something like that. And that's where they go to these virtues. And then that's where Christianity, like we do that with God, we do that with being a virtuous Christian and things like that. So that's a lot of those tie-ins from there, I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I'm glad. Sorry, I just put in some gum just because.
Oh, you're good.
But anyway, I'm glad you mentioned Ecclesiastes. That really does. I remember when I first went to my Anglican parish, which I'm still at now. One of the first sermons I heard from one of the priests there, it was on Ecclesiastes. It was a series going through Ecclesiastes, and I never appreciated the book before then. But he was preaching on it, and he directly said in the sermon, for some reason, that one bit in the sermon stands out to me. Like the rest of it, I just don't remember at all. But that one bit specifically stands out to me, where he says that he knows multiple people who came to the faith through reading Ecclesiastes. And that I never thought of that before. That just hit me. And as I processed it in my head, just on my own, I came to see, okay, because Ecclesiastes is about this. Okay, no, that makes sense. I never thought of it before, but it actually makes so much sense. Precisely because Ecclesiastes, in a way, is like just the most real book of Holy Scripture. And when you do read it, and then you read the Stoic philosophers, it shows that the inspired prophets and the Stoics they basically tapped on the same question, which is perhaps like even with certain parts of the Stoic answer, the pagan Stoic answer being erroneous, nonetheless, the fact is they tapped on the same question, which many other ancient thinkers and philosophers just failed to properly tap on. And so I think that's probably a way of seeing that's probably a fundamental way where, relative to other philosophies, Stoicism just comes much closer to Christianity than others.
Yeah, especially if you want to look at it more in a biblical way. Just hanging on Ecclesiastes for a second, where again back to that kind of that hedonist point of just being surrounded by desires of the flesh, and hearing this echoing phrase, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. All of your fleshly wants, your fleshly desires, your like addictions, like not even just with like drugs or alcohol, but it's like even getting addicted to being angry. Like people love to be angry. People love to get emotional and tied into all that. It's like that's meaningless. I know people who are very emotional people, and it's like they almost get a crack out of being upset all the time, and it's just like that's worthless. Or like, you know, you could strive, or you could be like Elon Musk with billions of dollars, but it's like he's gonna. I mean, he's weird, but it's like he'll always strive for another billion. How many more billions do you need to obtain before you're satisfied? It's like the answer is not enough. And you're going to work it until the day you die, and then your son will do it, and he'll work it till the day he dies. It goes on and on and on from stuff like that as well. But just to hear, it's like, no, again, that doesn't mean to be lazy or anything like that, but it's just like, no, it's like there's something more to this world besides that. And growing up as a young person, again, this is what latches people onto those closenesses, is just having that reassurance of whatever the world is telling you virtually is meaningless. There's something more to this, and getting hooked onto that.
Very true. Very true. And I was actually just because I was on the way to a small morning weekday mass today, and on the way, I decided to pick up my edition of Seneca's letters, and really flipping annoyingly, there's actually a few letters that are not included in this edition, so I want to get rid of it and get one with a. I just hate that so much. But Seneca's, he basically says something like numerous points throughout his letters, but I happened at this point, because I'm going through them all in order, to go through, was it letter 16 maybe, where he basically, he says to his Lucilius, imagine you have all the possible most insane riches in the world, more than anyone can fathom. You've got a place made of gold. You've got all the best paintings, all the best sculptures, throw in like everything you can imagine of all these incredible riches, more than any single individual could even hope to possess. You have all that, and you'll still find yourself wanting more.
Yeah,
you'll never be satisfied, because that's basically the nature of that base desire for riches sake. Because as soon as you get some, maybe for the moment you'll be like, yes, I've got it, but then you'll think, no, I want more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even then, having that idea, it's like he couldn't carry that stuff to death. I mean, again, Seneca had all those things, but he died in a bathtub. So, what's it worth?
Yep, exactly. There you go. How about
tragic that story is, by the way.
Sorry?
I said tragic is that story, by the way, because he was killed by Nero. So it's like that's kind of the cool little like connections I see, where it's like, oh, around that time, like that's when Paul and Peter got killed and all that.
Yeah, that's it. And like in the book of Acts, Paul does meet Seneca's brother, so that's pretty epic. Pretty epic crossover universe. But anyway, so I don't know if you answered it directly. Who would you say of the Stoic? If you did, completely forgive me, because it was just a long discussion. Who of the Stoic authors would you say came closest to like the Christian answer?
I'd say probably, I don't know, because it's kind of like they all kind of touch up on it a little. I'd say probably the closeness, just because I have a fan theory, conspiracy theory, where it's like maybe out there in the world, so at some point Paul and Seneca had a sit down conversation, because he met his brother, and kind of it's like probably Seneca, just because I think he would have at one point heard something of the Christian faith of some kind. It's definitely not Aurelius, because he actively went against Christians.
Yeah.
I'd probably say probably Seneca out of all of them, as controversial as he was.
Okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I'm personally, frankly, I haven't read much really beyond them yet, but I'm personally on a toss-up between Seneca and Epictetus of like who's the more.
I was thinking Epictetus would have been just a close second, but I think just because of timeline reasons, I think Seneca would have just barely beat him out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. So you're thinking of like who's like most likely to convert or something, perhaps. Or, yeah. Fair enough. That's fair enough. Yeah. I guess that kind of makes sense. What about? Okay. I mean, I didn't really have more questions beyond this, but I guess what kind of a reading order or plan, I guess, would you recommend for people who want to get into Stoic thought?
If you really want to get into the Stoics, I would say first start off like figuring out what Stoicism is. Like I said, I would recommend the Lives of the Stoics, because again, it's just a walk down from Zeno to Aurelius of every popular Stoic who ever had any influence on there. And then start with the big three. The best of Aurelius's translation is this one right here. with the little bird. I forget who the editor was. It was Gregory Hayes. So like this is the one you need to pick up. It's fairly cheap paperback. Then Epictetus from the Penguin Publishing. Again, there's some stuff in there, like some people are kind of weird with translation, but I've read this and it's fine. The Letters to the Stoics. This one doesn't have all of them. There is a set. They have like a set of everything from the ancient world, but they have like all the letters there. But this one is fine. And then surprisingly, the Princeton series, they have like a whole vast. It's not just Stoics. It's just kind of for everybody. One I like because I'm on a Seneca kick, the how to have a life or on the shortness of life, and it's cool because you get English on one side on the right, and you get the Latin on the left side. So you can, if you want to, you could pair up with that. Again, Cicero with a lot of his writings. Again, same for the Princeton Press. For me, wrestling with kind of life at the moment, because last year was kind of a tumultuous, chaotic time. 3 books I really stuck to. I wasn't like in a state of dying, but a lot of things around me kind of died in a weird way. So it was like the big 3 were how to like kind of in an order. It's not in order in my hand, but it's like how to live, how to grow old, and how to die. Good. And it's like being okay with at any point, hey. And this is the big thing about the Stoics. I just completely blanked out until now. And you see this in Catholic writings, you see this in Protestant writings all the time, is the idea of memento mori, or remembering that you're mortal. It's just knowing with that finality of life in a way, it's like, yeah, I'm not immortal. I'm going to die one day. And being able to virtually with virtue accept the fact that I am mortal and I'm going to die one day and be okay with that. And granted, we have more assurance with that with Christ, because again, like I know that like, even though I die, it's not the end. I just pass from this life to the next. But just having that just realism, just really sitting, it's kind of strange and it's kind of dark, but it's like, I do this a lot actually, where I'll sit down and I'll think about the day I die. And it's like, am I ready for that? I'm not going to ever be ready, but it's like, can I be like Seneca as he was being dragged from his family who were crying and weeping to a bathtub to end his own life, and him being okay with that? Like Seneca, I don't remember the full quote off the top of my head, but he kind of almost echoes Socrates when he was dying, where he's like, like, don't cry for me. This is just life. I'll go with nature kind of way. Again, I'm heavily paraphrasing, but pretty much just knowing that's the end. Can you accept that kind of deal and have people around you live on with it? And it's kind of that idea of just being real with yourself in that. And you can do that with anything, like, because there's other more cheery books, like, how to be a friend, like knowing that I'm not going to be friends with everybody in the world, but how can I be a friend, or how can I give without making it about me, or how can I do the right thing, or stuff like that. And obviously, Scripture goes on top of all of that as well, but just having those type of writing. So I would recommend the Princeton Press series, again, these publishing or the Penguin Publishing stuff with Seneca and Epictetus, and then the Gregory Hayes translation of Meditations would be like the writings that I would go with, and the history book of the Stoics with Ryan Holiday.
That's great. Thank you very much for that recommendation. I will personally add, so not strictly a Stoic author, obviously, but I'm in a group of fellow Anglican friends here in Sydney. We read through various Anglican or patristic texts together. And the one we're going through right now, it's a very large and meaty text, is the Anglican divine Jeremy Taylor, his book Holy Living, which is also paired with Holy Dying. And reading through it, as we've been going through it, I've immediately noticed, like, it, for one, it's very detailed, very, very detailed on proper Christian living. But reading through it, I can't help but just constantly think, yeah, he's definitely pulling from Stoic thought, both in the way that even just pure Christian thought already agrees a lot with Stoic thought, and vice versa in the proper sense. But also even just in certain particulars of certain themes, certain emphases, where he's very clearly drawing from the Stoics, and sure enough, he explicitly quotes them numerous times, either as, "Oh, Seneca says this," or "Zeno said that," or even just the Stoics said this or that. And so Jeremy Taylor, I mean, look, personally, I would characterize him as a Christian Stoic. Obviously, the Stoics proper were not Christians, so that is the necessary modifier. Although, per what I said earlier, I do kind of personally think Christian Stoics are kind of redundant because again, I get we disagree on this, but I do personally see Christianity as, granted, substantially different in a number of ways, but still as like kind of a form of Stoicism, the true Stoicism, one might say. And so it's almost redundant. It's almost redundant to say Christian Stoic, in my opinion. Like, if you're a Christian, you are a Stoic to some extent. But nonetheless, in a more explicit way, I reckon Jeremy Taylor is more or less a Christian Stoic. And so for people who want a book that is quite meaty on the proper ways to live, and if you actually really want to be challenged with your vices, including things which you didn't think were vices but may actually be vices, read Jeremy Taylor's Holy Living. It's an amazing work.
Another one I would read, again, he wasn't Stoic by any means, but it's like to understand like the realism of kind of like with the how to live, how to die stuff, is C.S. Lewis's A Grief Observed. It's like, if you want just a powerful, raw, like, this is what it means to be human kind of deal. Like, I just gave that book away to my cousin's wife. So I don't have it on me, but it's like, I'd highly recommend that. It's like, if you want a Christian version of like how to deal with death in like the most raw way imaginable, read this book. And you'll kind of see a lot of like with what Seneca was talking about with like his dealings with death and his dealings with life, and just knowing like how, again, like we word it in a different way, but it's like how final things are when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Well, Hugh, I think that's basically that for the discussion. So, Zach, thank you so much for that, and we will now transition into a little bit of Q&A. I only have one or maybe two questions so far, but if people do want to send them through, do so now. And we'll start as a priority with this super chat from Eddie. Lovely to see you, Eddie. Thank you so much for that super chat. Would it be accurate to say the Stoics got some things right through natural revelation, but what they got wrong was due to a lack of special revelation?
I would say in some areas, I think they would hit it right on the dot. Like I said, like on the just knowing you're not the, I mean, okay, they would say in a way you are the universe with how they were the logos and whatnot. It's all technical. I love it. But it's just like knowing that you're not the main character, and you need to realize that, and realize that there are bigger things to you. Either it be a soldier, an emperor, or the universe itself is bigger than you. So it's like, in a way, it's like it humbles you, as Christianity would humble you in that way. But obviously, yeah, like in a lot of the final conclusions they come to, it's like, no, you swung and you miss.
Yeah. I would largely agree with Eddie, although I think even some things, because again, some Stoics had a very weird view of God. So I think, and even on some of those things, I would actually say even on a few of those things that they got wrong, they shouldn't have gotten wrong because natural revelation would actually reveal that. I do believe things like God's transcendence, distinction from the universe, and what have you. I think that is something very well within the purview of natural revelation, and even some of them kind of got stuff like that wrong. Although I recognize there's a bit of debate on precisely how some of the Stoics view God. Like, but yeah, that's a whole thing of its own right. Yeah. So there's that. Actually, I can't see. Actually, no. I think there is one more question I saw. There's a little bit up here. I think I thought I started somewhere. Was something about Stoicism and Quietism. It was somewhere. Where is it? It was somewhere just up here. Here it is. Okay. From Old Catholic. Question: was Quietism influenced directly from Stoicism? I don't know if you know about that.
I have no idea what Quietism is.
Okay.
I'll keep it real with you.
So, as a basic thing, So from what I know, quietism is basically a Western contemplative mystical practice where you're basically just, there's no human activity, you're silent, you just let God, you let the divine basically impact you directly. That's literally just reading the Encyclopedia Britannica. That's all I know about it.
I was going to quickly look it up, but yeah, I mean, if that's the case, it's like maybe maybe, but it's like the Stoics weren't against talking; they were just live your life.
Well, that's it. Yeah, I mean, like,
so it's like maybe there's something in there that's kind of tied to it, but it's like I'm not sure. I'd have to look.
Yeah, there could be a connection, but if there is, it would be very, very, very loose because quietist practice, again, from my very brief reading, it's not quite what Stoicism is aiming for.
I would say probably the closest thing, I think it was Aurelius. I mean, it was probably somebody in there, but he just said like something to do with like, like wise men speak very little or something like that. I mean, that might be Proverbs. Yeah. Something like that. Like, I just know that's from somewhere. So.
Yeah, perhaps. Eddie with another super chat. Thank you so much, man. Ecclesiastes does end with a warning against mindless philosophical.
Cool. Oh. Sorry, brother. What can?
All good. Shout out to Zach's brother. Ecclesiastes does end with a warning against mindless philosophical wandering. Perhaps then the prescription is that the law is the final answer. For Christians, it's that law and gospel. Yeah.
He gives that final bold, like, I've spoken of everything that you could ever think of as an old wise man. None of that matters. Here's what actually matters: fear God and keep His commandments. And it just keeps it plain and bold like that. And so that again elevates everything to its higher potential from this being just a Stoic thing or something like that. It's like, no, if you want to be Christian, fear God and keep His commandments. Yeah.
And actually, I will say, with reading the bits of Epictetus, again, notwithstanding certain views of his, where he actually does kind of touch in on that, where he will basically say that, look, I want to, the best way to live is basically to know God, to love God, and to live like God. And it's one of the first quotes in the Stoic Path, but I also, again, I looked up the original for context. But he basically says that, and I think that's great, although obviously he's handicapped by only basically having the natural revelation and not having the full sense of what it means to know God and to love God and all that. So I do think even on that thing, that fundamental answer, it's weird. The Stoics have a fallen, very flawed shadow of the right answer. That's basically what I'd say.
Yeah, and I'd say like somebody who wasn't a Stoic who also got really close. Probably the closest even from the Stoics was Plato. I forget that one line he drops, but he drops. I can look it up really quick, but it's such a line that's like you could just tell if he knew of Christ, he would have just said his name, but he just didn't get there.
You have to send me that line.
Yeah, here I'll send it to you.
Sweet. Eddie, it is likewise very good to see you. It has been a hot minute. It's been a while since I streamed last, actually. Yeah, it's been ages. But I guess while Zach's finding that, people, by the way, awesome thing. As I announced a while ago, I did an interview on the channel Eschatology Matters, and that was pre-recorded. But the interview, I think, has been released for their YouTube members, but it should be open to the public within a week or so. And very good interview, basically all about the current political stuff with the dissident right. But my interview, I wanted to be different in that I wanted it to be what I wanted to say to my fellow dissident Christian right guys and how we should be properly behaved.
Just throw it in the chat here in the scene.
Great. So Plato says the just man will have to endure the lash, the rack, chains, the branding iron in his eyes, and finally, after every extremity of suffering, he will be crucified, and so will learn his lesson that not to be just, but to seem just is what we ought to desire.
Yeah, it's from the Republic. First thing, again, it's just like, oh, if you just knew who Christ was, man, you got it.
Oh, boy.
Especially when he just straight up goes, yeah, he'll be crucified. It's like, oh.
Oh, Plato, we got news for you.
Yeah, I mean, there are some theories, like when it was about the heroin of Hades, that like allegedly, according to tradition, it was either, I mean, it would have actually been Socrates, not Plato. supposedly Socrates was probably one of the first Gentiles in the afterlife to accept Christ and go to heaven. It's like, if you're saying stuff like that, I could probably believe it. Where it's like, oh, this is a God who got crucified, and he's saying all the stuff that I said. All right. So that's kind of, again, that's one of those like nice little fan theories where it's like, hey,
yeah,
maybe he's in heaven.
Yeah, that's it. That is really one of the golden questions. What about those guys who perished before the coming of Christ? And not just as like a sympathy thing, like, oh, it just seems cruel if not. But like, I personally just see Paul. I think people don't really appreciate it enough when Paul says in his sermon to the Athenians, God has overlooked the past times, but now that Christ has come, no one's without excuse. And blah blah blah. I think that should give us pause onto what we think of the fate of pre-Christian.
Well, there's another part in First Peter where it says like he went down to the Spirit. I mean, it's talking about the people of the flood, but it's like regardless, he went down to the Spirit in prison, proclaimed the gospel like post death. So it's like, what if there's anybody else there too?
What if? So in the end, it is speculation, but one can hope. One can dare to hope. But with that said, thank you very much for these questions, Eddie. And actually, I will point Patrick here. He has a couple of book recommendations. Stoicism in Ancient Christianity and Paul and the Stoics are essential reads for this subject. Trolls, Engberg, Pedersen probably has done more in this field than anyone. But if you really want to understand Stoic cosmology / theology, then God and the cosmos in Stoicism is important. Most modern commentators on Stoic theology have read an understanding of Stoic beliefs.
Yeah.
Well, that seems very true. So true, King.
Yeah. I have seen those books before that he's mentioned, but 100%. That again, the troubling part about looking at modern Stoic writings is a lot of it is like the broicism, like, oh, do this and you'll pick up a hot chick from the bar when you just don't talk to her and look like bold and brash and stuff like that. It's like that's not
Babe, son, I'm trying
how to get $1 million, a jacuzzi, and a Lamborghini. Read Epictetus. Is like, nope.
Quiet, babe. I'm trying to be stoic.
Let's practice that quietism really quick.
But thank you for those book recommendations, Patrick. Very much appreciated. Thank you, Eddie and Old Catholic, for your questions. And thank you, most of all, Zach, for coming on for this awesome, God willing, very helpful discussion for many people. Where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter, kind of with the same name, Anglican Catechumen. Find me on YouTube. Those are kind of like my two mains I do for all my public stuff. I talked about this in a tweet. I think it was Young Anglican, and you made a mention of it as well. That's where I remember. Where it's I upload on YouTube, but I have a terrible issue of being a perfectionist. So I'll make like an entire video it all. I'll get all the details, like, oh, this is perfect, and just immediately delete it because I was like, oh, it could have been better. So I do put YouTube videos out there, but I'm mostly active on my X, formerly known as Twitter. Oh, thank you.
Great stuff. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Zach. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This has been The Other Paul. This has been Zach, the Anglican Catechumen. I hope you all have a lovely day or evening. God bless.
God bless.